Next up, we've got the famous, the infamous, the beloved David Stark from the East Bay, California. And I'm excited for this presentation. Dave, I mean, legendary presentation skills, legendary personality, an institution. And I'm just grateful to be sharing a screen with you, Dave. So,
did you just say I need to be institutionalized?
No, Dave, I did not say that. I
would not be wrong on that. Just saying.
You're awesome. All right, Dave, thank you so much for your time today. I know there's a million things going on. We're very excited to hear from you. And again, once Dave is done, if there are some questions for him, we'll take some time for some Q&A as well. But with that, Mr. Stark, the floor is yours.
Great. So my dad is Mr. Stark. So he will not be part of this presentation today, unless he's jumped on. So can you all hear me okay? Hopefully yes. And can you see my screen? Hopefully yes. Yes. Okay. Actually, I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Just to make sure that, okay, that's 2 yeses. Okay, cool. So we're going to go back to sharing my screen and we'll continue on. This is the first time I've ever done this, so bear with me while I get my act together here. Okay, want to share some stories and experiences that we've had over the past couple of years. And my apologies to Charles Dickens, and my apologies to anyone who thinks that a Christmas reference is too early. It is August. We've been experiencing some unseasonably warm temperatures here in the San Francisco Bay Area. So shamelessly appropriating Charles Dickens' structure for this presentation might be my way of just trying to deal with some extremely warm temperatures. So just to set up a little bit of context, I want to share where we do our thing and why that's important. So I work for the Bay East Association of Realtors. We represent real estate professionals in southern and eastern Alameda County. And if you're not familiar with the San Francisco Bay Area, we are just to the east of San Francisco. And our geographic area is represented in this the green oval there. So 2 of the communities that we don't cover are Berkeley and Oakland. That's the domain of my colleague, Kieran Chenoy from Bridge Realtors, who has his hands full with the unique political realities of those 2 communities. That said, a lot of things that start in either San Francisco or Berkeley or Oakland, because many of our decision makers want to keep up with the political Joneses, they make their way into the small suburbs that I represent. Now, within that universe of communities in southern and eastern Alameda County, about 6 of them have transitioned to district-based elections. And in some of the smaller communities like Dublin, Pleasanton, you really only need a few thousand votes to get elected. And that's going to be important when we talk about what we've done with independent expenditures and what we're doing within expenditures now and what we'll be doing in the future. District-based elections have become a big deal. There's a couple of attorneys that cruise around California. They see if city councils are representative of your area, and if they aren't, they essentially say, we're going to sue you, city, unless you go to district-based elections. And it's really changed the dynamics of politics where we do our thing. So let's talk about what I'm calling the ghosts of IE's past. And more specifically, that's our experience during the midterm election. And you can see there's some examples of some of the IEs that we did. We had several goals as we went into the midterm election. Number one is that we had a lot of very angry realtors. In 2022, there was still a countywide eviction moratorium in Alameda County. And if you were a housing provider, you were suffering under some pretty austere conditions in terms of your ability to stay in business. And realtors were very angry about that, both philosophically and practically. We also wanted to get our committee members actively involved in the IE process. So there was a need for us to do something based on this realtor anger. We had a pool of realtor volunteers who were curious about IEs, and we wanted to get them involved in the process. from a political standpoint, we wanted to share with both incumbents and new candidates that Bay East is a player. We wanted to send a very strong message, and you'll see how we conveyed that message when we get into the number of IEs we did. As I mentioned earlier, in 2022, several of our communities were just transitioning to district-based elections. So we were curious about how this was going to play out, and we felt it was an opportunity for us to experiment with some IEs in some of these smaller races to see if we could move the needle. Of course, we wanted to get our candidates elected, but it wasn't our only goal. It was an important goal, though. We also had some candidates we definitely did not want to get elected. So when we get to how we did in the 2022 cycle, we didn't win all the races, but we effectively were able to block some of those candidates that we definitely didn't want to have in. And then finally, at that time, I had some administrative staff that was helping me out and wanted to bring them up to speed on the IE process, both from a business continuity perspective and also just to keep them engaged and to show them all the fun things that we can do with independent expenditures. So those are the things that were pushing on us, and why we decided to jump into so many IEs during that election process. So here's what we did. I am not going to walk through all of these, but if you're counting it up, yeah, we did 15 local IEs during the 2022 cycle, and it was a combination of mail. All the campaigns had an online presence, and we did texting as well. And you can see that the budget, in some cases, Terry Wiley, district attorney candidate, so that's a countywide race, Lena Tam, a county supervisor candidate. Those are some big money operations. And then we had some pretty modest campaigns as well. We get to Pleasanton City Council, representative of some of the new district-based elections. We only spent a few $1,000s in those races, and we only did online. So we're really experimenting with both large and small independent expenditures. So how did we do? 15 IEs. Here are the results. Yeah, they kind of speak for themselves. We had more losses than wins. That said, the win that we had in the supervisor race was absolutely critical in terms of ending that eviction moratorium, and Lena Tam has been a very good friend since. Take a look down at the bottom. There is a city council member in Union City. That was a good win for us. I was just speaking with this gentleman yesterday about a ballot measure. And then we had 3 candidates. While they weren't elected, they effectively blocked some real bad candidates that we didn't want to get elected. So it's 5 wins, 3 kinds of meh, and then several losses as well. This isn't the only story, though. We learned quite a few lessons from this experience. Among those lessons would be that it is possible to do 15 local IEs during a campaign. Is it a good thing? Well, we'll talk about that in a minute, but it is possible to do a whole bunch of IEs. Next, it did jumpstart some relationships with some elected officials. Sort of. There were 2 critical races in one of our communities where within a few months of the election, there was a sign ordinance issue, and those electeds simply weren't there for us. So that was really disappointing, and it certainly is resonating in what we're doing this cycle and what we'll do going forward. However, as I mentioned with the Union City Council member, I sent him a message. I text him. He's right back at us very quickly. So that's been real good for that relationship. The other thing that we learned, most of our communities are suburban. There is significant anti-housing sentiment, significant NIMBY sentiment, and in some cases we have some stakeholders who have access to unlimited resources, and they are willing to back their NIMBY candidates. And we had some losses where it was a combination of NIMBY candidates backed with big money, and regardless of what we did, we probably weren't going to win in those races. And it's also informing what we do go forward. The other thing, and this is where the district-based elections really play, we had a couple races in Pleasanton with small districts. We had one case where there was a last-minute candidate that filed. She jumped into the race and she absolutely split the vote and spoiled that race for us. And we really wanted to block an incumbent. We really wanted to do a regime change there, but because of this last minute candidate, it foiled our plans, and it was really disappointing. And I think if you're operating in small district-based elections, that's something you really have to keep an eye out for. Is there a possibility for a last-minute vote splitter that will spoil your party? And the big lesson is, yeah, we did 15 IEs. We aren't planning on doing 15 IEs in this cycle. And while we didn't do ground in the last one, partly because we were still dealing with some lockdown issues, going forward, we will be considering ground games, whether it's through an IE fund or through mobilizing some volunteers. Ground is absolutely critical, particularly in these small district-based elections where it is feasible to walk the entire district. So we'll be looking at that as well. So those were the ghosts of IEs past. Let's take a look at the ghost of IE present, which is our 2024 present and general elections. So as we approached this cycle, there was a sentiment let's do some IEs. And the things that were driving that enthusiasm is that we had a crucial county supervisor race, and we've got some crucial mayoral races where if the wrong candidate comes in, it could have a devastating impact on the production of new housing. And on the county supervisor race, again, a pivotal race regarding tenant protections and basically the viability of rental housing providers. Another issue is that there's another opportunity for us to block some opposition candidates. We've got multiple open seats during this cycle, so we're really positioning ourselves where even if we can't get our person in, we definitely don't want that person to get in. So let's do some IEs in that race. The other big factor, and I mentioned earlier that we're operating in a NIMBY environment in many of our communities, is these candidates in these NIMBY environments, they definitely want our endorsement. They definitely don't want a direct campaign contribution. Because in our case, the check doesn't come from the Bay East Association of Realtors. The check comes from our state association with a Los Angeles address. Not that there's anything wrong with Los Angeles. I grew up in Southern California. But if you're operating in a NIMBY environment, one of the last things that you might want to see reported is a check from a state realtor association with a Southern California address. However, and while we're not coordinating, we do get a strong sense that these candidates who don't want a direct campaign contribution are very enthusiastic of an independent expenditure. So when I say money, not so much, it's that direct contribution, but the IE, yeah, let's do some IEs. At the same time, based on what we learned from 2022, is that we do plan on doing fewer IEs. We have 10 that we're looking at right now. Much bigger dollar values. So fewer IEs, more money in those fewer IEs. So I don't think we're going to be doing any $6,000 IEs because, frankly, for a variety of reasons, it didn't move the needles for us in 2022. Also, based on 2022, there's a sentiment about maybe let's not do some IEs. And some of this is based on things that have just happened in the last few weeks. One of the things that is changing our plans for this cycle is that there were 2 uncontested races that we were planning on doing IEs. And if it's an uncontested race, and these are also races where we were hoping that there would be opposition candidates coming in, it's just silly. So there's 2 IEs that we probably won't do. There's no probably. We won't be doing because the races are uncontested. We also have in one community a ballot measure regarding how business license taxes are calculated, and that's changing our enthusiasm for support of some candidates who are also backing this ballot measure. When we planned our IE budget for 2024, we didn't know that this ballot measure was going to be coming up. So we budgeted and made some plans for some races where we may need to back off because of this candidate's involvement and their support for that ballot measure. At the same time, in terms of use of resources, that same ballot measure that I referred to, we're looking at, well, what's going to get us more bang for the buck? Is it going to be influencing these candidates who may revisit this ballot measure if it passes, or doing a direct issue campaign? And I know that Real Strategies has the capacity to do issue campaigns, do that kind of mobilization. So one thing that you may want to look at is it better to put our resources into the policymaker who may or may not be with you, or the issue directly? So that's starting to become part of our calculus as well. And as I mentioned earlier, those relationships that we built or sort of built, and how those candidates that we supported in 2022 weren't there for us, we're a little bit more reluctant now to do IEs based on those experiences. And I'm not trying to quote the Great White hit song from the 80s if you're a hair metal fan, but it's true. You know, once you've been burned by a candidate that you supported, it's taken us a minute to really think about what we may do with that candidate in the future, and just IEs in general. So these are the things that are informing us right now. To complete the analogy, let's take a look at the ghosts of IEs yet to come, and I'll be brief in this. Just a few things that we're thinking about and that you may want to think about as well is that the yet to come, of course, are the results of this election. We will be monitoring very closely the success of our IEs, both whether the candidate, if they're successful, or even if they aren't successful, if they acknowledge our involvement after the election, of course, because we won't have any contact with them before the election. At the same time, is there going to be any blowback? We are engaging Joe to do a survey in one of our large communities that will inform what could be a very, very large IE in that race. And we'll be looking to see how that plays, because in this particular community, the candidate that we're trying to block is weapons grade NIMBY. And there is absolutely going to be some realtor money in that race. So we're going to be seeing how that plays in that community and if there's any blowback. Next, we're going to start early. And when I mean start early, it means that as soon as this election is over, we'll be taking a look at who's going to be on the ballot, what races will be up in 2026. We are very comfortable with doing early endorsements because it also makes it a lot easier to do IEs. And I would encourage you to do the same thing, because it helps us determine what we need to be doing with where we're putting our political money in 2025 to make sure that we do have that war chest in 2026. I'm going to show you a spreadsheet real quick. I'm not going to go through every line, but this is just an example of how we planned for the 2022 race. I don't want to put our 2024 or 2026 spreadsheet up here because it does talk about IEs, and I don't want there to be any kind of sense that we're being public with our IEs at this point. I'd be happy to share this technology with you offline as well. We simply go through, identify all the open seats. We take a look at what the contribution limits are going to be, the direct contribution limits. We budget in terms of, are we going to max people out or come in a little bit more modest? And then we take a look at what we're going to be funding locally in terms of IEs, and what we may be reaching out to NAR for in terms of their IEs. So we did this planning for 2022 back in 2020, which allowed us to put money aside for 2 years before the election, which then enabled us to do those 15 IEs. And we'll be doing something very similar to this as right after the election. The other thing that you can use this early planning for is to help establish your fundraising goals. I've had conversations with government affairs professionals over the last few weeks, curious about fundraising and what they do, and I start these conversations with the same question: how much money do you need to raise? What is your goal? So if you're planning on doing a bunch of IEs in the next cycle, figure out what that price tag is going to be and use that as a goal. As you're going out making pitches, you could, for instance, say, we anticipate doing some regime change in these communities through some campaign activities. In order to make that regime change possible, we need this amount of money. And I think that's one of the things that's interesting in the fundraising world is it's raise, raise, raise. And I know that there are that NAR has some goals that are tangible, but if you can get some local goals, it'll really help you measure your success locally. And it's also a way to inspire your members and also help them wrap their minds around, well, how much money do you need? And specifically, what are you going to do with this money? Of course, you won't be able to disclose the details of an IE, but if you're using language like, we plan on doing some things to make a difference in this community, and we need X amount, that could be a compelling message. And last, and I just want to leave you with this. One of the things that we learned back in the 2020 cycle, when we were in the middle of COVID and we were locked down here in Alameda County, we couldn't do ground, is that look at whatever the new campaign technologies are going to be, going forward, and don't be afraid of exploring these kinds of cutting edge technologies. I know that pre-roll was a pretty cutting edge thing a few years ago. I don't know what the cool new tech is going to be in 2026, but I would absolutely keep your eyes and your mind and your heart open to doing something different. It may be more cost effective. It could help with your budgeting as well. So in terms of looking at the future, certainly don't be stuck in the past in terms of which campaign techniques you used. I know I used some kind of dark and mysterious imagery with this presentation, so I'm going to leave you with this. Hi, yay, we're bullish on IEs. I'm David Stark. I work for Bay East Association of Realtors. My contact information is there on the screen. David is at bayeast.org. You can text or call me at 925-914-7049. And I just appreciate the opportunity to share our experiences. Those goes from past, present, and yet to come. Thanks a lot.
Dave, thank you.
I'm going to try to stop sharing now. Did I stop sharing?
I think you have successfully stopped sharing.
Okay, yay.
Well, thanks again, Dave. Great information, and I love the way that you kept it real, right? Like sometimes there's some big highs from involvement in these IEs, and sometimes you come away from some experiences with a little bit of a bitter taste in your mouth. It's just part of the job, right? So no, I appreciate you sharing your perspectives there. And I've got, while we're waiting, if there are some questions, I had one just as I was listening to you talk there. What was kind of the overall split as you were putting this plan together in terms of local money? You don't need to get into specific numbers, but like, how did you kind of cobble together all the resources, right? So I'm sure there was a mix of local, partner, maybe some state and national. Was there coalition partner money involved? And were there non-funded things that you were doing with your members or other things that were kind of adding additional goodwill value where you're, so I always like to say that, there's rarely a better opportunity to earn some goodwill points with a candidate of any kind than those paranoid days when they're in a campaign and everything that someone does, perceived or real, for or against them, they are absolutely keeping track and remembering. And it seems like there's a lot of good opportunities, even if you're not spending money, to win some of those goodwill points, whether it's sign locations or having a couple volunteers go help out. So were there any unpaid things as well that maybe you do?
So I'll start with the last question first. We are very paranoid when it comes to IEs in terms of contact with candidates. So we tell them straight up after we go through the endorsement interview, especially if we think that we're going to do something, we tell them straight up, hey, see you after the election. And that's just to protect us. I mean, we've got political bloggers and other folks that are looking at everything that we do. Right. So we are very, very circumspect in any kind of communication we have with candidates, which would include like, hey, did you love those signs we put out? So, yeah. I mean, that's just how we do it.
Sure.
So nothing cool there. I want to circle back to your first question. How do we decide which flavor of money to use? We looked at the big races, particularly like the countywide races, the district attorney, some of these key county supervisor races, and we realized that we're looking at a scope that's going to involve probably polling, and then lots of voters we're trying to reach. Those are the ones that we said we're going to go to NAR for this. And we did, and we've been successful in securing those resources. I mentioned the race that we have in one of our communities that's absolutely pivotal. We went to NAR for that. For the rest of them, we're very fortunate that our members are generous. We have resources. We also are pretty strategic in terms of banking our resources and budgeting and planning for what we see coming down the pike. So the rest of the races were all locally funded. And I want to thank Real Strategies. I mean, your team was absolutely, over the years, have been absolutely helpful in helping us put budgets together. So we chat with you throughout the year, even in off elections, to say, hey, about how much do you think it would cost to do X, Y, or Z? And then in putting that budget together, we take a look at previous campaigns to just kind of, let's see if we think it's going to cost about this. And that technique has been really successful. We've had the resources needed to do that. I understand that other associations may not have those resources, but to me, the budgeting process and deciding what flavor of money helps not only staff, but your members that are involved in the process really wrap their mind around, well, what is this IE thing? The more specific that you can get in terms of the cost, in terms of the scope, and kind of take it out of the technical sides of things. I think that really helps the members understand what you're doing, and ultimately they're going to support and be part of the team. So I answered the first question. I answered the last question.
You did great. You did great. Yeah,
there
go
were
ahead.
9 other questions in the middle that
Well, your last answer was a great segue to actually a question that we got in the chat. Oh, and here I think it may be showing up on the screen here. So, do you ever get a lot of blowback from the realtors in your association for being so involved in those local elections? Yeah.
So that's me knocking on wood. No. I mean, there's one particular member who does not like receiving any information about candidate endorsements, but no, our members seem comfortable with this, and we're pretty transparent in terms of, who we're endorsing, why. Also, we don't advertise, hey, Bay East members, we're doing an IE. No, I mean, so the members are only going to know that we're doing an IE if they live in a district where we're doing an IE, if they're part of the target that's receiving whatever content. And again, knock on wood, no blowback. And I think part of that, Justin, particularly in the 22 race where we did so many, we had a lot of angry realtors. Do something. We're sick of this eviction moratorium. We're sick of these politicians. So if anything, they were probably happy that we were actively involved.
A couple of thoughts as you were talking there. One, I think it's so important that's why it's so important to have a good process and a good rationale. I assume you guys have a good, either a candidate interview process or some rationale or committee decision that you as a staff can say, this is what's guiding our decision-making process. So you can defend decisions if anyone does ask.
Yeah, and that starts with our housing and public policy statement, which we make available to all of our members. We make it available to all of our candidates. And if you start with what you believe in, and especially if what you believe in is all good stuff, it's kind of hard for a member to push back ideologically or from a policy position. Typically, if they're going to push back, it's because what the heck, sorry, let me rephrase that. What the hell is your associate? Why are we in politics? Why are you spending money on these politicians? So they're not necessarily pushing back on the policies. It's more of a philosophical, you association should not be involved in politics at all.
Yeah. Yeah. So there was a follow-up question here as well, just related to, or have you gotten any blowback, I guess, in the community, maybe not from your members as much, but okay, we're the kind of the boogeyman special dark money group. And does that actually hurt in some cases candidates that you've done IEs for?
There is a race happening right now where an opposition candidate is basically saying that the candidate we like is buying the election with developer money. But that's his shtick. That's what he does. And also the candidate that we like does some low grade development work himself, not very much. So even if we had zero money in this race, he's going to be portrayed as evil developer. So, and we know that. It's also one of the reasons why we're polling is that we've asked Joe and his team to dig into where is the community on residential development, because you can have this guy, spouting his NIMBY hate, but if it's not resonating with the community, then it gives us an opportunity to not only lean in, but then not worry about potential blowback, because if the poll, depending on the poll results, there may not be any blowback at all.
Yeah, no, Dave, thanks so much. Well, I think we are at the end of our hour here. Just want to say thanks again to Dave and Joe Good. Joined with my colleague Christine here at the end as well. Our other colleague Julian's out on PTO this week, so hopefully she's resting, having a great time, whatever she's up to. But Dave, Joe, thanks again, seriously, for your time and your sharing your experience and your knowledge with everyone. We've got great comments and feedback from everyone, so really appreciate you taking time to do this, and we'll hope to see you soon. And thanks to everyone for spending your time with us this afternoon. And as always, from the Real Strategy standpoint, if we can help you with anything, please let us know. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.